It is quite overwhelming when you care so much about the people you love and their greatness and what they decide to do in life, when it is of no significance to them.
Not like, what did I do wrong? He says, my problem with you is not that you don't have the ability to go further, not that you're not doing some good stuff. He said, but your problem is not your enemy. Your problem is the people you love. You are not where you're supposed to be because you're still entertaining people you love about where we're supposed to be. You still babysitting the footman when you on the horse. And you stopping on every occasion to go back to those who you love, who ain't caught up, because you trying to go back and get them so they can. He said, leave them. Leave them. That ain't your job. So you should be further along in your ministry. You should be further along in your finance. But you spend a considerable amount of time talking to people you love about what God told. I told you to do this. You ain't got to get their cosign to do what I told you to do. Do what I told you to do. Now look, I don't know your story, but I don't like to disappoint God. So I found that I got two lovers. I've got God and his people. And he said, do me a favor, put me first. Don't put them first. I'm saying God told me, leave those people behind that you got to convince.
Stress response theories. Stress may be defined as a non-specific response to perceived environmental threats called stressors. But a particular environmental change, a demand, or an event may be perceived by one person as stressful and by another as benign. An examination is, for example, likely to be less stressful for a student who has mastered all homework assignments than it is for a student who waits to cram the night before the test. The generalized feeling of fear and apprehension associated with a stressor is called anxiety. Anxiety is typically accompanied by activation of the sympathetic nervous system and increased physiological arousal, which causes rapid breathing, increased heart rate, sweating, and dilation of the pupils. Fight or flight. In the 1920s, Walter Cannon recognized that the automatic nervous system is activated in response to stress and suggested that stress mobilizes the body's responses in readiness for either attacking, fight, or fleeing, flight, an enemy or threatening situation. Although such responses may have promoted survival when they evolved in human history, they are not productive given the longer periods of stress exposure common in modern life. Such enterprises as keeping a job, going to school, and playing on the soccer team require more complex responses. The General Adaptation Syndrome. Hans S. is credited with identifying the body's reaction to stress with a syndrome he called the General Adaptation Syndrome, which has 3 phases as evidenced by the level of stress hormones. Stay tuned. Continuing stress response theories. The General Adaptation Syndrome. Alarm. The body first organizes physiological responses similar to fight or flight responses to threat. Resistance. Stress-activated responses continue, stabilizing the body's adaptations to stress. Exhaustion. The body has depleted its reserves and can no longer maintain responses to the stressors. During the alarm phase, when the body is first aroused, the hypothalamus sends signals to the pituitary gland. This endocrine gland in turn secretes adrenocorticotropic hormone, ACTH, which travels via the bloodstream to the cortex outer layer of the adrenal glands, where corticosteroids are released. The hypothalamus also activates the adrenal medulla, the central part of the adrenal gland, which causes adrenaline, epinephrine to be released and the activation of the sympathetic nervous system. After maintaining high levels of the hormones for a long time, the body loses its ability to do so and exhausts its resources. Cellier is credited with identifying the fact that the incidence of certain types of diseases, stress-related diseases, such as some types of coronary disorders, increases during the stage of exhausted body resources, and that a second stressor introduced during the resistance phase or the exhaustion phase further increases that incidence. Evidence demonstrates that prolonged stress also affects the ability of the immune system to function adequately and can affect the release of other other neurotransmitters such as serotonin. Stress may also affect the release of endorphins, chemicals similar in structure to morphine and other opiate drugs used in the modulation of pain. Do you face your problems or do you run, dwell, and hide?